All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Families First Leadership Luncheon. It's great to see so many familiar names and some faces. So thank you so much for being here. My name's Amy Lorwood. I'm the Interim Director of Development and Communications here at Families First. And we have a very special afternoon in store for you with remarks from our Executive Director, Sue Kobitz, and a presentation from our guest speaker, Kristen McSwain. Kristen is the Executive Director of Boston Opportunity Agenda. And before I turn it over to Sue, I just want to make a couple of housekeeping notes. We'd like to first ask people to please stay muted for the duration of the program. We will have a Q&A portion where we'll be inviting people to send questions. So you can go ahead and send those to Ellen, who is listed as the moderator of this event. Ellen is also going to plug the agenda into the chat for people wondering the timing of the event. And I think that is everything. So with that, I will turn it over to Sue.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome, everyone. As the Executive Director of Families First, I am thrilled to be joined by all of you for our early spring leadership luncheon. I'll just say that the goal of the leadership luncheons is really to bring supporters, staff, and others who want to learn more about Families First and the early childhood field. And we generally offer about 3 of these a year. So thrilled to be launching this spring with our first one. So I'm going to share actually some slides quickly, which will just take a second and we'll get us going. All right. So before we launch into the presentation, I wanted to share just a little bit more about Families First. For those of you who don't know, we believe that all parents have the power to shape their children's future and their community. And in fact, the research is quite clear that supporting parents when they have young children around their parenting and goal setting for their families and themselves leads to better outcomes for children. We have 2 programs that address these areas of need, the Power of Parenting and Parent Leadership programs. And in these programs, Families First equips parents to 1, use positive parenting strategies to promote their children's healthy development and well-being, and 2, to engage and advocate within local institutions that shape lifelong outcomes for children. One of the local institutions that we work closely with is the Boston Opportunity Agenda, where 2 Families First Parent Leader Fellows from the Parent Leadership Program are working on supporting the Family Engagement Subcommittee work, which you will hear about in a few minutes. And today we are pleased to have Kristen McSwain, who is the Executive Director of Boston Opportunity Agenda, joining us to share an overview of their early childhood work. Prior to joining Boston Opportunity Agenda, Kristen served as the Chief of Program Operations for the Corps of National and Community Service. She has spent her entire professional career in education and national and community service. She is a strong advocate for these causes and has served on the boards of Boston Cares, Friends of the Children, Boston, and Voices for National Service, just to name a few. And we just learned that she has accepted the position of Senior Advisor and Director of the newly announced Office of Early Childhood in Mayor Wu's administration. Congratulations, Kristen. And now I'm turning it over to you, Kristen, to share your presentation, and I will come back on the other side.
Thank you so much, Sue. I'm thrilled to be here with you all today to talk about the Boston Opportunity Agenda, and more importantly, the work that's happening across Boston in the Birth to 8 space, which is the space in which we've been partnering with Families First for a number of years. So I think the first thing that's really important to understand is that the Boston Opportunity Agenda is a public-private partnership. And so our membership includes everything from the City of Boston and Boston Public Schools to our core philanthropies in Boston. So the Boston Foundation, the United Way, Combined Jewish Philanthropies, and a number of others, as well as some of our other bedrock institutions. So Bunker Hill Community College, UMass Boston. And we're really thinking about how we create a just education ecosystem in Boston by removing the systemic barriers that have created unacceptable outcomes for some of our most marginalized families. So that's the lens that we bring to all of this work. And we do it in three primary ways. The first is by focusing on data and creating a public conversation and public accountability by using data to lift up some key metrics, to bring to bear common definitions, and to be tracking Boston's progress over time. So I'm going to talk today a lot about some of the data that we've been looking at in the early childhood space and how that's been informing our policy, our advocacy, and the convening that we do. The second piece of what we do is this work around collective action. So how do you bring people from across diverse sectors who have a stake in the work? So in the early childhood space, that is everyone from the Boston Public Schools and childcare providers to families, parents, young people, and then our researchers who are doing research on early childhood, people in family support organizations, so that you're bringing everyone together to create a plan for what we want to do in early childhood. And then the last thing that we do as sort of one of our core strategies is align investments across the space and advocate for efficient, effective, equitable investment in education. And that includes, as I said, the early childhood space as well. So that's a little bit of who we are and how we operate. And I think we'll provide the frame for how we're thinking about early childhood in Boston. When we first started this work in 2017, we brought together a data committee that included people from Wellesley Center on Women, the mayor's office and their open data committee. We invited some people from the early education and care office, practitioners who had lots of questions. And we developed a list of 61 questions for what we wanted to know about what was happening in the early childhood space. And we didn't have data on any of them. And so we set about saying, how do we build a data set so that all of the things that we want to do are really informed by what's happening and what's happening not only in Boston, but in neighborhoods across Boston. And so we started with what data was available, which was primarily childcare. And we looked at the availability, the quality, and the cost of childcare in Boston, both as a city and by neighborhood. And we've been publishing a report every year, and in some cases twice a year since we've been in the pandemic, to really say, what do we know about childcare? How is that impacting families? And how is that impacting the work that we do in early education and care? One of the things that's driving the current conversation in the early childhood space right now is this lack of childcare. And what you can see here in the data is that we've seen a decrease in the availability of childcare both before COVID and then obviously it's been impacted by COVID. And we're beginning to see a little bit of a recovery from some of the investments that have been made, but it's still a really challenging operation, mainly because this is what is licensed. It doesn't get into, are there enough teachers in a classroom for a classroom to be open? So we actually know there's less childcare than what you see here because not everything that is licensed is fully open. So how have we been using that data? We've been using it in a couple of different ways. The first way is by using it to advocate for funding and to create policies that improve things for families and for their young children. So one of the ways we've used this data is to advocate with the city to create a child care census. We know that there's a shortage of childcare just based on the number of children who are born but we don't know what parents want. Some parents want their children in formal care. Some parents want their children in informal care. How do we learn more about that? So the city has created a citywide census that says, parents, do you have young children? And can you tell us what your preferences are? Can you tell us whether or not you can afford the childcare you have? And if you had unlimited resources, what kind of care would you like? So really gathering that information to drive policy and practice. And then the other thing we've been doing is using it to advocate for investment. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the city invested $500,000 in supporting emergency childcare. And since then, they've been investing in training and technical assistance for our family childcares, which are really small businesses and need those small business supports, but small business supports that are directed at the kind of regulated industry in which they operate. So that's sort of, the ecosystem, I think, that's happening in early childhood right now. And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is how do we solve our current challenge around childcare? And one of the things that I would posit as a solution, in addition to advocacy and in addition to public funding, which we know are important, is that we create a coordinated early childhood ecosystem that really has our families at the center. And this is where I think Families First has been such an important partner, both in the city of Boston, but now as you're beginning to grow statewide. Because as we've been working in the Birth to 8 collaborative with the Boston Opportunity Agenda, we really started with this premise that parents are the first teachers of their children. So all the research that Sue just talked about in terms of providing parents with what they need in order to know how to work with their young person is really critically the first part, right? So within that, making sure we're doing parent education. The second part is designing opportunities for parents to lead and uplifting parent voice. And this is where we've been partnering with Families First to really be leading a family engagement committee of the Boston Opportunity Agenda. So bringing together different organizations across the city of Boston, talking about the parent leadership that all of you have been trying to do independently, what that looks like, how you talk about it, how you measure it. So in our first year, we dug deeply, and Magda Rodriguez, who is here today, was really a critical partner in helping us think about what do we want to measure? What's important to know about parent leadership, and how do we know when it's done well? So we've developed some tools. We're in the middle of piloting them. They're in 7 languages so that they feel welcoming to people, but so that across the city of Boston, we can begin to say something about how families feel about the programming that we're giving them. But we realized that that wasn't enough, right? Just giving parents opportunities to lead and opportunities to be engaged in their own program. We wanted to expand that parent leadership and parent voice in multiple levels. And so this year we've been hosting a group of parent fellows from Families First, and they've really been helping us think about how do we expose people to parent leadership across multiple spaces at multiple levels. So parents, how do they learn more about parent leadership opportunities? Organizations, how do they learn more about different opportunities in different organizations? So if a parent has finished the entire parent leadership program at Families First, what's the next place for them to go? And how do we begin to build this career ladder for parents and for parent leadership and parent voice? So we've begun to explore that through a 4-part parent leadership learning series that's been planned by our parents. And so I think when Sue and I sat down and we envisioned it, we were probably more programmatic in nature than what we've ended up with. Because when you work with parents, you end up going to the places that they want to go and answering the questions that they want answered. And I think we've learned a ton in doing that process with them, and are better positioned next year when it's done again to really be building on what the parents have helped us create in a solid foundation. So really, the first part of work has been identifying places where parents are leading, taking stock of that, and then thinking about the multiple levels. The next thing that we've been trying to do is build this network of parent leaders across organizations. So our fellows are helping us to connect with other parent leaders. And they are building a playbook that says, here are the opportunities you can have to lead at Vital Village. Here are the opportunities that you can have to lead at Families First. Here are the ones at Higher Ground, so that everyone has clear and transparent information on how you maneuver through those different spaces. At the same time, we've been thinking about different kinds of opportunities to build citywide networks of parents that are based on a topic. So for the past 2 years, we've been working on a parent screening platform that engages parents doing screening of their young people. It's a very solid family engagement network opportunity. They've been learning how to go out, meet other parents, screen children for developmental delays. So we're getting important information about young people, but it's being led by parents, and then building a system by taking that information, adding information from childcare centers and family childcare, so that we have a citywide look at how our young people are doing. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I think it relates to this challenge that we have in terms of thinking about childcare as a public good in our city, thinking about opportunities for parents to become a part of the solution to that problem, both our shortage of workforce, our shortage of people who own their own businesses and are doing it in their home. And so we've been working with Families First and other organizations to say, okay, we've got this really rich resource. We've got parents who've started their journey by being engaged with their own families and doing that deeply. They then have begun to do some parent leadership work and think about their own development as they move forward. But how do we capture that resource and put it to work in some of our employment shortage challenges? And we've been building 4 ways over the past 18 months that I think hopefully will bear fruit and help us solve some of our workforce shortage problems. The first part is we've been recruiting parents who've been doing the screenings that I just talked about to serve as fellows and to provide some of the cultural and linguistic capabilities that we've been missing. So we're paying them to serve as fellows, to come and share what they know with the new group of people that we have been training. And that's, 4 or 5 people, but growing. The second is that we have looked at our parent screeners and developed a coaching program for them so that they have been trained to coach other parents. Again, beginning to build that pipeline. We've now got these parent screeners, we've got parent coaches, we've got fellows, and you're beginning to see how they're developing the skills that are necessary to move from sort of, I've been a stay-at-home parent, I've been doing that for a number of years. This is perhaps my first time back into thinking about full-time employment. So what do I have to put on my resume that I've been doing in the last 5 years? And so these are the building blocks for that. Or I'm a new immigrant to the States. I've participated in Families First. I've gotten a lot of experience that builds on whatever I'm bringing with me from my home country to what I now have as a resume here in the States. Those things are part of the solution, I think, for the early educator pipeline that we have been seeing built in the city of Boston. So really working with our workforce development folks and our childcare providers, they've started a program which would recruit people like the parent leaders we've just been talking about, give them a human growth and development class, which is one of the requirements they need, and then put them in an apprenticeship where it is paid in a childcare center. And at the end, they're not only going to have the hours that they need for licensure, but they're also going to be hired, because we've already seen those apprentices being hired before their apprenticeship is over, because the need for childcare and the childcare workforce is so great right now. So that's sort of one piece of the solution. The other piece of the solution is for those who actually want to become their own entrepreneurs and to start a family-based childcare. So what we've seen is with the city of Boston, this focus on how do we recruit some of our parent leaders who we've been growing and knowledge both about child development and working with families into starting their own business. How do we walk them through the family chair licensing program and support them along the way? And so the city has a new pilot they're doing. It's only 10 people, but if we get it right with 10 people, you could see that growth over time pretty quickly. You could go from 10 to 20 to 50. And when you think about the fact that each one of those childcare homes can have 6 to 10 children, that's adding a great capacity as we're seeing these numbers of available slots being missing for our families. So that's just some of the work I think that we are seeing happening now in the city of Boston that's really focused on families and doing the deep developmental work with families in terms of leadership and starting there, but then really thinking about, we've built this asset. How do we move from the asset that we've developed into this greater solution for all the things that we are seeing as challenges in our early education and care field? So I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to turn it over to Sue, and then we can go from there with questions. But thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Was great to hear. I've heard a lot of certainly know Kristen well and Boston Opportunity Agenda well, but it's always great to hear the full presentation. And I was really focused on those first few things you said about building an ecosystem with families at the center. And it struck me how much that is something I think we, care deeply about at Families First with our two programs, and, really speaks to the alignment between our two organizations, and especially the emphasis, that you placed on, parents as first teachers, the role that parents really can play in shaping systems. And, we've, as you said, Kristen, the work that we've been doing with both Jamie and Stephanie and Rosemary, who are parent leaders. One of the things that really struck me, we had our third convening, and we had folks coming from BP at Boston Public Schools, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Early Education and Care, and parents really had, said to us, in particular, Jamie, Stephanie, and Rosemary, that, from their perspective, they really wanted to learn more about, why it is so hard to engage with those systems, and that's their perspective, right? They've felt that it's not easy to break into those systems and have conversations about your child and your child's education. They brought that in, and then we also talked about it, and they said, but we want to have an appreciation also for what it is like to be on the other side in that system. And so they, we created a panel of folks talking about that. And there was a conversation about, what are those challenges, but what are those opportunities to engage? So really was, an incredible opportunity, and the parents shaped that discussion, as you said, Kristen. I think that's really an important part of, what we believe, in terms of our value system, and also how we see the work happening with you all. So as Kristen and I have now, I'll repeat what Kristen said. We're happy to take any questions folks have. So, this is an opportunity, to talk, not just for us to talk to you. So let us know what we could do. And Amy, if you have, I know you have received, or
Yes.
some questions you want to share with us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can kick us off. So I think sharing a concrete example of, a parent who has really helped to demonstrate what it can mean when a parent engages in a system to change, a policy or whatever it may be, can help people really grasp the impact of this work. So if one or both of you can share an anecdote or a story, I think that would be great.
I was going to actually, I see Magda is there too. So I'm thinking of calling on you, Magda, only because you're closer to the program and all of the work that happens this way, and you're a family engagement expert. So I'm turning it, Magda's our Director of Growth and Strategy and Programming. I'm turning it to you perhaps to answer that question.
So I know Sue, you will call me. So Right. So hi, everyone. My name again is Magda Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Strategic Growth and Programming, but a long-term advocate of family engagement, specifically on parent leadership. So have been great to work with Christine McSwain and the Boston Opportunity Agenda. They truly believe in this work, and we've seen a lot of excitement. So again, Stephanie and Jamie, they attended our Parent Leadership Academy trainings that we offer in the fall, and they were really looking for opportunities to bring their ideas, their voices, and we were very fortunate that we decided, and they decided to partner with us in this parent leadership initiative and this parent leadership learning series. I think it's just, I remember at the beginning, they were so worried that just by contributing their voices, they were not given enough to the community. And when they start seeing that just by expressing how they were feeling, the gaps that they were seeing in the community, and helping us just even draft agendas. They, again, Sue mentioned this, they help us to ask questions that really were meaningful for parents. It really make this program, take it to the next level of this learning series. So I have seen a tremendous growth for Boston Opportunity Agenda and for us, for the Family Engagement Committee, because we have never been able to create this learning series without those parents' voices at the level that we did. But also themselves, they have grown so much about the way that they feel confident about their voices. They are able to see how important it is to bring parent leaders and support them. So I have seen from our parent leaders who are part of this initiative, but for the agency as well, Boston Opportunity Agenda, how much we have grown together. So again, just those two stories of this two parents, they haven't even opened the parent leadership series with Remark, and they have done an incredible work at expressing themselves, opening, but also doing a lot of work behind the scene, contacting agencies, recruiting parents, and spreading the word about this. So again, I think this is a great example of the work that we have done. And Christine, feel free to add anything that you have seen maybe specifically from them.
So I think all of what Magda just said is true, and really a great gift to the agencies that you're partnering with. I think there's a couple of things I would add. The first is, yes, they expand our capacity, right? So they've been reaching out to people, they've been doing all the legwork and really preparing. They also, helped us become bilingual in that all of our invitations used to be in English. Now they are in English and in Spanish, as opposed to someone just coming into an event knowing it will be translated, but at least this way they're also getting the pre-work. So those are sort of basic things. But I think one of the most important things that the fellows have brought to us is this filter on, is the decision that we're making the right one? And I say that because when we first adopted some of our tools that we wanted to use to ask parents, whether or not the organizations that they were working with were being parent-centric and culturally responsive, and a list of other things. We had a tool in there that they're like, what are you going to do with this information? It feels really intrusive. And it feels like if you're asking this set of questions, you need to be prepared to do something with that data. And we said, well, we were going to use this tool because it was one of the things in our research that said we should know about. We should know about parent stress. And so that said, it impacts parent leadership, knowing about that. But we're really not going to do much with it. And they're like, yeah, then you shouldn't ask it. Now, we knew that as practitioners, but I think having parents say to you, this data is intrusive. It's asking us questions that if we have a trusting relationship with, we might answer. But we also really want to know what you're going to do with that data. And if you're not going to do anything with it, don't ask. And it was a really good check for us, because as practitioners, we know that. We like, that's good practice. But we're in the middle of doing something and you're like, we've been like, this is principle number 1, and here's how we're going to measure it. And here's principle number 2, and here's how we're going to measure it. Sometimes you forget. And so part of that relationship with them was really relying on them to give us honest and direct feedback about the kinds of interactions and the way our interactions with parents might be perceived. So I think that that's just one example of the real critical partnership that they've brought to us, and how we think about parents citywide and how we communicate with parents citywide.
And I was also just going to add that, from my experience being a part of this work too, that watching Stephanie, I'll use Stephanie as an example. I know they couldn't be here today, but Stephanie was able to move from, playing a role, right, to help us think about that, to actually, alongside all of us thinking about, well, if this is so important, family voice at the center, and we think about these are the types of conversations we're having at Boston Opportunity Agenda, then that should go all the way up to the mayor, right? And so we brought a strong message to Mayor Wu that families, in addition to all the other things that need to be looked at in this ecosystem that are important, but family voice needs to be at the table. And, Stephanie was at that meeting with the mayor alongside all of us. And, that came out of the work that we were doing in this subcommittee, that we asked directly to a whole group of parent leaders, what would you want the mayor to know? And, that had an influence, I hope, and now with Kristen taking the lead there, to really ensure that at that early childhood office, parent voice is a part of, what informs and guides, a lot of the thinking in that administration. So, I really watched an evolution, all the way from, okay, here's the work we're doing, all the way up, locally, to how can that have an impact on, decisions that are made across the city. So really, I think important work, and really, I think, as you said earlier, Kristen, elevating the voices of parents, I think is so critical.
Thank you. So we do have another question here, and this one is for Kristen. And the question is, how does Boston Opportunity Agenda share information with and learn from other municipalities in Massachusetts and similar large cities in the United States?
So there's a couple of different ways that we engage both in the state and nationally. I'll start nationally first. So we are a part of a national network called EC Link, and it's early childhood learning. I don't remember what the rest of LINK stands for, but we've been meeting together for probably 10 years with cities across the country who are convened by the Center for the Study of Social Policy. And that does two things for us. One is it allows us a space where we're actually in conversation with cities across the country. So in California, in New Mexico, there's probably about 10 cities who've been part of this community. And it is both a place for us to learn and a place for us to show off the things that we've been working on and get feedback on them. And one of the things that happened probably 3 or 4 years ago was they had a parent convening in California, and we sent a number of parents from Boston to that convening, as well as folks from, I think, Families First, but definitely from the Family Nurturing Center and the Boston Family Engagement Committee. And they went and were part of creating a national manifesto around parents' rights and what parents should be able to receive from any place that's offering them care for their children, formal, informal, family support. And so that manifesto has been used in trainings across the nation with other parents for the last 5 years. And it really forms the foundation of a lot of the way that we think about parent and family engagement in Boston. But it came from being part of this national community. They also have offered sort of different opportunities to weigh in on federal policy around how we engage families, as well as federal and national funding from philanthropic organizations. So that's sort of one way we've been doing it is through the EC Link community. And then in Massachusetts, we're part of the work that Strategies for Children has been doing and participating on their 9:30 calls, really sharing what we've been doing in Boston, particularly around our data work. And we have a workforce survey right now that's out in the field, really trying to gather information that's not available around why people stay and why people leave early childhood what their educational trajectory is, how old they are. So things that we don't know, we're sort of trying to gather through that state conversation. But those are two of the primary ways that we've been engaging with other communities.
Amy, it looks like there's a question from Ron.
Yes. So it looks like Ron is wondering, Kristen, you, Magda, and Sue discussed a number of key ingredients to successful parent engagement. Thinking about your new role, Kristen, what do you imagine an institutionalized system of engagement might look like in your office so that parent participation becomes more core to policy development and implementation?
Thanks for that easy question, Ron. So I have a couple of thoughts. The first is, you know, the mayor has some initial things that she wants to do. And one of them is really providing an opportunity to have a one-stop place for information for families around childcare and opportunities for both formal and informal childcare. You know, I think that as practitioners, we all have ideas about what that should look like based on the BPS enrollment, based on UPK enrollment, but that may or may not work for families. And so I think that, you know, what I would like to do is establish protocols, too strong a word, but lead by example and ensure that we're either hosting family focus groups out of that office ourselves, or, and I think this is probably more likely and a better way to go about it, asking our partners, Families First, ABCD, Neighborhood Villages, Vital Village, Union Capital Boston, the folks who have trusting relationships with families, and going to them and saying, hey, can you host a time for parents to come and give us feedback on what would be most useful to them? What do they want to know? What have been the barriers that they have found in trying to find resources, and how would they like to access this information? Is it on a website? Is it on an app? Is it something that is mailed home to them? You know, we make guesses about what will resonate most with families. And so I think that this is a real opportunity to go directly to families and say, what are the different things that you need and how would you like to receive them? So I think that's the first. You know, long term, and I don't have a budget yet, and I don't have an office, and I haven't started yet. So, you know, next week for those things. But I think long term, we should be thinking about what are the resources that as a city we're investing in families. All of us are paid to do what we do every day. And so how are we compensating families in order to bring their expertise to the table? And really thinking about that, you know, is it a line item that says we have stipends available for parents when they do these activities? Or is it, you know, saying to people like Families First, do you have a fellow who'd like to come sit in our office and help guide our work? Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to put in place as process pieces that are just part of the regular part of doing business. And hopefully leading on that from the early childhood office, we'll seed it into other places in city government. But at a minimum, if this is an office dedicated to families and children, we need to make sure that their voices are right up front in leading the conversation.
Well, as Kristen knows, we're interested and excited to think about placing fellows at the mayor's office. It really, I think, would be a wonderful opportunity to make that happen. And I'd reiterate things I think Kristen knows, but we just want to always have front and center, which is, you know, if we're asking parents for feedback, just making sure that we're valuing their time and that we're giving them a chance to hear what that feedback is and how it's being implemented, and making sure that they feel that that's valued, you know, as we walk through the whole entirety of the process, I think is important. And as you said, Kristen, I think you know, paying folks and an opportunity for folks to be paid for their time is something we believe strongly in at Families First, in terms of ensuring that parent leader fellows and parent ambassadors, who are the folks who stay on at the organization, you know, are paid for their time. And I definitely think that's a commitment we all know is important. I mean, we've seen, you know, Magda probably could talk about this quite a bit, but, you know, for parents who've been through the parent leadership program and go on and do these community impact projects, as we call them, your site being one of those, that they get hired at all kinds of organizations. And that pathway you described, you know, for sure, there's you know, a lot to think about in terms of, can parents who are going through programs like ours become early child care providers? I think that's a huge, funnel potential, but there's also just lots of other pathways, and parents, I've had so many conversations, parents who've been hired at Families First, who've been through our work, who get hired, as community engagement folks at other organizations. Just most of them go on, to find jobs in various ways that are meaningful for them. And, I think that's one of the key things I think about too is, how do you coach that along so they find what they really want to do as well. In fact, Stephanie and I have just had a conversation. She's really interested in development, and so she's joining our development committee and doing some work with us. And that's her path. She's interested in doing some work in marketing and development. So I think all of this is great, and thinking about funnels and places where parents can fill gaps, but also we want to just make sure that parents are asked, what they do want to do and how they want to do it, so that it feels like it's what genuine and authentic engagement.
Yeah, I think that's right, Sue. And I think, that's one example, but we've got other examples of parents of becoming, community healthcare liaisons. But really, it's taking those skills that they've learned working with other parents and connecting them to the kind of work they want to do, whether that's in nonprofits in general, doing family engagement work. A lot of folks end up working with schools or nonprofits and family engagement work. So there's this wide spread of expertise, but I do think that if we begin to create some intentional pathways, it also helps address this challenge we've heard from parents, which is, I show up and people know me only with a parent lens, but they don't know that I have a PhD in parent maternal health. Absolutely. Or they don't know that I have a master's in speech language pathology, and no one bothers to ask because I'm showing up first as a parent. And so it's that focus on how we value what they're bringing to the table, both what they've learned in these programs, but what they came with to begin with, that I think is sort of changing that pivot when you think about parents as a resource differently.
Yeah, absolutely right. Excellent point. All right, well, I think we're getting closer to the end here. I don't know if there's any last minute questions that folks may have, or if anybody wants to share anything else on the either Kristen final words or anybody on the Families First team. I'm opening it up for just a minute in case somebody does. All right. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I in particular want to thank Kristen, who, as you can imagine, is transitioning between one big job into another one. And we are incredibly excited for you and looking forward to all that you will bring, I know, to that role. And it's a great opportunity to really have a huge impact in the city, and really looking forward to all that you will accomplish over there. I should just say that we have another leadership luncheon coming up on May 26th. So you'll get an invitation, and it looks like our moderator, who is behind closed door number 1, Ellen, who's got the nice fancy logo in front of her. I want to thank you, Ellen, for everything you did today to make this happen. But she's put in the chat that March 26th will be our next leadership luncheon. It actually is, we do sort of a back and forth between thinking, kind of big picture, informing folks about what's happening in the early childhood field, and then switching back over to a little more about Families First. And we'll probably talk more specifically about expansion. There's just been, as you have all heard from us, a lot of excitement around our expansion to Western Mass, our expansion through early education and care with our parent leadership work that is statewide. And so we have lots to share and discuss with all of you. So that will be May 26th. And of course, in between, you'll hear from us in different ways. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you everyone for coming today.